Making Schools Inclusive, a peer article reviewed presented by Matt Pentecost and Kimberly French for the LMU educational course EDUC 6100. The article that will be presented to you is entitled The Inclusive School Integrating Diversity and Solidarity Through Community-Based Management, written by Boscardin and Jacobson. The authors in this article discussed how schools in the United States over time have struggled to achieve diversity and inclusion of all students. They presented how diversity and solidarity have seemed to be at odds, present, and observed among the different systems of schools in this country. So the problem being posed rather, is how can schools integrate all of its students and yet celebrate each pupil's unique characteristics that he or she brings to his or her environment. The study, of course, was primarily a hypothetical and observational study. Both the authors proposed their ideas about how diversity and solidarity can be contiguous and therefore not at odds of each other. They presented an idea of an inclusive approach where schools serve their students better when there's a sense of community, where solidarity is being promoted and diversity embraced. And in this idea, in this inclusive approach, diversity is valued within the context of solidarity. That in this multicultural, diverse, inclusive school, it supports a community-based concept that the pupils, the students, are part and is part of the community, where the community is part of their learning, is their learning process. With this idea, the authors tried to describe or explain how this model of education is needed. And they did that by describing the four types of schools that have evolved here in the United States over time. The first being is what we call the common school or public school. In this system, it was developed with six fundamental ideas that the public needed to be educated by the government. That first, of course, there was a need for public education, and that it should be controlled and paid for by the public. In this system, it should encompass and embrace all children of various backgrounds, free of any religious influence. Everything in this system is governed by the beliefs of a free society, and education should only be provided by trained teachers. In this system, it called for a greater sense of conformity, of how children learn in the society, that it is a sole responsible of the public to educate these children in a confined, conformed structure. But with the rise of immigration during the industrialization period, it called upon a transition or a mutation into a more centralized school, with the industrialization period going on, it called upon for a need for a highly trained laborers. So with that, the idea of a diversified school environment was not as valued as it was. There's a division of labor and specialization occurring during this time. It called for a more structured kind of education. They added the preschool, the secondary, and the vocation education added to the public education that in this in this new system it's more structured than ever, that students in this system, the centralized school, it's the students are separated and segregated based on their ability level. In a centralized school system that came to be, it is more of a formal structure, and school boards and administration have developed specific goals and policy that must be adhered to by all schools. With this system, more and more students became and have received education, but these students by greater length are grouped homogeneously, and more so became more segregated depending on their ability level or the type of disabilities that they have. It became more staggered and focused based on the student need. Now, years after, America have, of course, experienced far greater immigration. There was increase in the Asian and Hispanic enrollment between the mid 1900s, and with the increase of student diversity, it was recognized that there's a far greater call for productivity, that education needs to be standardized and centralized. So this new and much more diverse population needs to be educated on the same level, that this new standardization approach needed to be done. But over time, the schools and or districts have found that with this high centralized model or controlled model, it actually restricted them from adjusting to the need of their individual population, that it decreased creativity, that it decreased the sense of education and learning, imparting learning to these diversified group. So now comes the next kind of school or type of school. It's what the authors call the site-based managed school. With this type of schooling, there's an emphasis on flexibility, especially from the private sector, that similar to the common school, that it celebrates solidarity, it is focused more on what the authors call the contiguity-based solidarity. In these models, there's a shift in regards to control from the central office more so towards each school site. In this structure, it's still organized in a sense that it conforms to the central control office, and yet the education of students become more localized or site-based. For example, the allocation of money and services are more so decided by the local site depending on their individualized needs. And that is more common with our public schools today. All the districts, all the schools are divided by districts, but they still answer to the central governing body. But the authors also presented how in this model, where a lot of programs are being offered to serve the various needs of the community, especially with the recognition that there is a continuous increase of diversity with much more diverse racial population, and it is projected that with this increase of diversity, that more students will be at risk. In the study, they have presented that with this greater risk of students, that there's more need for economic assistance, physical assistance, emotional and service, social assistance, and hence the legislative body have proposed or presented more services and programs to support these diversified student population. But then the problem comes in mind that with this staggering amount of programs, these programs actually act separately. And hence, they're competing for funds, and that services is fragmented. Consequently, as a consequence, it actually hurts the services of the students, that the students are less likely to be serviced. With this problem comes the proposal of the authors that schools today should have more of an inclusive idea. In this exclusive school, it's developed as a result of course, as discussed earlier, population growth and the growing special needs population. Hence, it will focus more on the collective effort in the idea that the whole community is part of educating each child, that there's a collective effort of the whole community to educate its population. It moves beyond the limitations of formal relationships of schools. It authentically promotes solidarity or a sense of community and diversity. It again celebrates individual differences and embraces diversity. In an inclusive school, it's more of a community-based management, that all policies, all management, the day-to-day imparting of knowledge to students are a product of collaboration among all shareholders. And because of this, the learning as presented by the authors, then extends beyond the parameters of the school. The learning becomes part of the community, and the community becomes part of the learning. In this exclusive school system, it believes that students can be one unit because they are diverse, and each person brings in something unique that can benefit everyone in that community, hence the diversity. Because each student are being recognized with their unique individual talents, it is then transformed of how their talents can meet the needs of others. And doing so, diversity is authentically accepted because it becomes a necessity and part of the community. So in conclusion, the authors present that this kind of school meets